What if one of the most powerful tools for mental clarity, emotional healing, and even physical performance was hiding right under your nose? Welcome to Performance Lab. I'm Dr. Michael Donovan, and today's guest is Dr. Richard Blake, a trailblazer in the world of breathwork. We dive deep into conscious, connected breathing, a potent practice that's not only reducing anxiety and depression, but unlocking mystical experiences, enhancing physical performance, and pushing the boundaries of what we know about mind-body medicine. If you've ever wondered whether breathing could literally change your brain, this is your episode. Let's get into it. Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I'd like to start off with three things. The first is an intention. So what would make this conversation a win for you?
Well, good one. Yeah, I think getting across my message, getting something interesting across to my audience or your audience, and having them learn something they didn't know and think, that was worth listening to.
Awesome. The second one is a fun question. What's your walkout song or your walk-in song?
Ooh, the first thing that pops into my head for some reason is I'm a Real American, the Hulk Hogan one, but I'm not a real American. But I feel like maybe one day I'll get citizenship and I can walk out to I'm a Real American. But until then, I don't know, maybe Englishman in New York, by Sting is a bit more appropriate.
That's actually what came to mind when you said that. So that's awesome. All right, and then I like to do some like short answer rapid fire questions. So the few of them are like a this or that. Meditation or breath work?
Breathwork all day long. Obviously, I'm a breath worker, and that Huberman study showed that breathwork was more effective than meditation for reducing anxiety. So there we go.
Awesome. Morning routine or evening ritual?
Los dos, both, surely. I mean, yeah, you can't have a good evening routine that doesn't start in the morning. Circadian rhythm starts first thing in the morning, so getting that sunlight in your eyes is a part of your evening routine, effectively.
Beautiful. Cold plunge or sauna?
Can we not do both? Am I allowed both? I have both. Yeah, I love both. Okay. From the perspective of someone new to biohacking and wellness, then I'll answer that question. What would I spend money on first? Probably the cold plunge, because it's cheaper and probably requires less time. You can get results in just 2 minutes, maybe a month. Once a month, you have to maintain it. I have the ice barrel. I think the ice barrel is the best intro level product. One, because it's cheap, and two, because I much prefer the position of that squat compared to the bathtubs. I've never been comfortable in an ice bath. Like, obviously you're uncomfortable because of the temperature, but at the same time, it's just like you're holding yourself in place. You don't want to sink any lower. You may start, if you try to relax and surrender, you'll just sink completely underwater, and you don't want that. Whereas the ice barrel, or any barrel, you can just be in that squat and just completely let go and just try and focus on focus on your breath and overcoming that pain and surrendering to the cold.
Awesome. Plant-based or omnivore diet?
Omnivore, yes, omnivore. I mean, most of the people I expect are on your show will prefer the omnivorous diet and think that meat is better. I think it's dangerous when you get into an ideology. I think a lot of people are become, they believe that veganism is the way to go, or they believe carnivore is the way to go, when they shouldn't really be believing things. They should be thinking about things critically. And the problem is with all these diets is there's research on both sides. There's research showing that processed meat is meat is bad for you. I did just see a study come out a few days ago that showed that both people who are eating processed and non-processed meat had worse biomarkers of cardiovascular health. So that really got me thinking, like, how bad is meat? Obviously, not obviously, but I certainly think that eating meat is a part of a nutritious diet. And if you go completely vegan, the cons outweigh the pros. But I also had the debate the other day with someone about lab-grown meat and whether or not I would eat lab-grown meat, because that takes away the suffering. Some people would just knee-jerk reaction. No way would I eat lab-grown meat. That's disgusting. You don't know what it's going to do to you. But my perspective is, once they've done enough research to show, it is identical to regular meat and it can be a part of a healthy diet and there are no side effects to it, then yeah, I probably would eat that meat because it would be would create less suffering. And I think then there would come a point where you would say, like, there's no good argument for slaughtering animals when you can just get it from lab grown meat. But I think there's a lot more research to be done on that topic before anyone can really say anything definitively.
Yeah, and it was a thought that came to mind when you said that is when we talk about an alternative, right, to meat, to dairy milk and things like that, right? We're comparing it to what the mean, like the average thing, because quality kind of goes out the window, right? It's just this nebulous thing of like meat, right? Which we know from nutrition science research that there's a difference in, even you can sometimes visually even see it without even testing it and whatnot, but between, there truly is, between grass fed and free range and organic and these kinds of things versus those that are corn fed and grain fed and don't move at all, right? And the hormone content and things like that. So I wonder if we'll, when we have lab grown meat, if we'll have like those variations of it, and it's like, this is the one that was grown in this lab, and so that's inferior. If we'll have this hierarchy of meat when it's
Mm.
lab grown, or if it'll even the playing field.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really interesting. Yeah, I think we need to sort of niche down in the research. Yes, this study I looked at the other day was processed meat versus regular meat, but yeah, what kind of meat is that? Factory farm chicken, battery hens, that kind of thing, hens that live in terrible conditions, or is it regeneratively grown, pasture raised, grass fed, grass finished meat? We really need to test those hypotheses further to make these conclusions.
Yeah, I mean, nutrition science is super complex, a lot more than I think we appreciate. But anyway, we'll move on. What's your go-to biohacking tool?
Okay, I guess I can't say sauna or ice bath, or breath work, I guess. I mean, I probably should say breath work. I just do my PhD in it. But if I had to come up with another one, red light, I think, is popping into my mind right now. At home, I have the big Juve panel, so I have two full body ones, and that's a big part of my morning routine. I go in front of that. I do some neurofeedback with the Sense AI, and take some methylene blue just before that to biohack my mitochondria, as they might say. And whilst I'm traveling, I'm on the road at the moment, I have the Flex Beam. So that's one of the few biohacks I can take on the road. I can't take my ice bath on the road with me. So the Flex Beam, it just goes in my suitcase. And, I just, when I doing oxygen advantage breath work in the morning as part of my morning routine, and I just wrap that around my elbow where I've got a little sprain, and it's just so easy. I just sit there, do the breath work, and let the red light do its job.
Awesome. So, what's a wellness trend or a biohacking tool that you think is overrated?
Overrated, overrated. What have I wasted the most money on? A lot of things. Rated. Well, there was that oxygen baths. I don't know. Oxygen. Yeah, literally bars. I remember going to, I think it was like Reading or Leeds Festival, like a music festival in the UK many years ago, and they were advertising these bars where you would sit like a bar of an alcohol bar, but instead of alcohol, you would have a cannula that would go up your nose of just regular oxygen. And the idea was, yeah, if you breathe in more oxygen, you oxygenate your cells. But now, as I've learned more about breath work and hyperbaric oxygen therapy, one, you have the Bohr effect. You cannot carry, the blood cannot carry more oxygen, or it won't release oxygen to the cells without the presence of carbon dioxide. So just simply putting more oxygen into the system isn't going to have an effect. Plus, I think it's the Thomas effect. I may have to chat GPT that, but under pressure, the blood can carry more oxygen. So that's why hyperbaric oxygen is so effective, is because that pressure means the blood carries more oxygen. Then that oxygen gets released to the cells, and that oxygen can be used for whatever it needs to be. So, yeah, oxygen without pressure, I would say, is a biohack that it probably doesn't work.
While we're talking about oxygen, let's talk about a variation of oxygen, which is ozone, because that was another thing that around probably that same time I feel like 10 to 15 years ago, there was a big push, and I haven't heard a lot about it recently. We were also talking about radical oxygen species and, those kinds of things a lot more in that time period, at least in graduate school for me. Have you had any experience with like the ozone? I mean, I'm sure you do.
I do actually, and conversely, I find that oxygen is or ozone is something that's becoming more trendy. It's something I hadn't heard about it for a while, but over the last couple of years, I have been hearing more about oxygen. And where we met, the biohacking conference, I tried oxygen. And I think it was the oxygen. It might have been a cannula. It might have been up the nose. It's something I've been looking into. Something I haven't spent the money on yet because I'm still unsure of its benefits. I know it's supposed to be very good for cleaning. It's supposed to be very good for like cleaning swimming pools. If I ever had a swimming pool, I'd probably look into ozonation. Or hot tubs and cleaning around the house as well. I've heard it's difficult to, well, one, you don't want to breathe it in because it creates a lot of reactive oxygen species, as you mentioned, and the lungs do not have a high antioxidant capacity. So breathing ozone is very bad. So maybe I didn't do the cannula of ozone because I would have been breathing into the lungs, and I'm just saying that is bad. I can't remember what I did. I
Well,
did something. I think I did
I
my
think in
ears.
those, it's oh, right, and it's bubbled in water that's circulated, and it's a little more complex. And I first did it like a decade ago. I had a friend who was, maybe he was on the on the leading edge of it. He was doing it more for people that going to festivals and Burning Man and those kinds of things.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, yeah, one of
but
the things that I think makes it interesting um, is because of vaginal and rectal insulfation, the
Mm-hmm.
delivery method. I think, well, one
Mm-hmm.
supposedly, the two of the best ways to get it is vaginally and rectally, and I think that catches headlines. That makes it popular. People probably giggle, hee hee hee, vaginal rectal insulfation. But I'm not against that kind of thing. I plan to do a parasite cleanse coming up, and I'm going to be doing a lot of coffee enemas, which is obviously rectally administered. Yeah, I feel like that. Sometimes I think with biohacking, it's like the weirder it is, the more people think it's really useful. So, being in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, people think, you're just like Michael Jackson. He's one of the weirdest people around or was around. And this must be really powerful. And maybe with it, yeah, the oxygen, ozone insulfation rectally, people, that grabs a lot of headlines in podcasts. Does that mean it's any more effective than simply taking your shoes off and standing in the grass and grounding? I don't know.
right, right. Well, a couple more quick questions, and then we'll really dive in. What's the most impactful book or podcast you've recently listened to?
Most impactful podcast or book? Yeah, well, I guess what I need to think about this one. I read a lot of books, and a lot of them just go in and out, in one ear, out the other. I guess this is a specific one, but Romani Dervasula, It's Not You, and she was just on Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO podcast, and she is a expert in narcissistic personality disorder. And I'd watched a lot of her YouTubes many years ago. I wrote a paper on can ayahuasca cure narcissistic personality disorder, because it's supposedly the hardest thing to cure narcissism, much harder than other things, because, well, one, narcissists will never go to therapy, and when they do go into therapy, they don't stay long enough for a proper diagnosis. The hypothesis of how NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, develops is it's trauma, and their personality is just a shell protecting them from this wounded individual, and you can never get through that shell. But supposedly ayahuasca can get through that shell. And yeah, that's probably one of the most it's certainly the most like impactful thing I've ever written. It's gotten like many thousands of views and reads on Medium. And then I finally found her book, and yeah, it really helped me to understand narcissistic personality disorder, and how to deal with it. What it's like to be in a relationship with someone, have a family member or a lover, or a friend or a boss, because NPD is out there, and it's not full blown narcissistic personality disorder. It's just people with highly narcissistic traits. And yeah, things to say about narcissism. I think some people just think, oh, Narcissus Rex, the I think the Greek myth, it was the boy who fell in love with his reflection. People misconceive or misperceive what narcissistic personalities are. They don't necessarily love themselves. They just think they're more important than others. They just think that their needs matter more than other people. And they can be very manipulative, have lots of gaslighting, lots of games, silent treatment, hanging up phones, that kind of thing. And it really make you doubt your existence. That's what gaslighting can do, why it's so cruel. Is so people really start to doubt themselves. But when you read a book like Dr. Dervasula's, it can be very soothing to be like, oh no, I'm not crazy. This person was doing these things. It's written here in this textbook, and all the people around them, because narcissists often have a lot of enablers. They can you can see, oh yeah, when someone says to you, you're just too sensitive, it's not that you're, the victim of narcissistic abuse. It's your fault for being too sensitive. You've got it written in that book. And you're like, yeah, see, I didn't think it was because I was too sensitive. I think it was because I was being mistreated by this person, by this boss, by this whoever it may be in your life. So for that, it was, for me, it really impacted me, because it was just like, wow, I'm not crazy, thank God.
Awesome. Awesome. So, as you said, we met at a biohacking conference. I know you just finished your PhD in breath work, but I can tell by that last response that was just what book have you listened? What book have you read recently? That you have a strong foundation in psychology and the mind. And I wonder if you could talk about that. And I think I always like to back things up to like the fundamentals and the foundations and the first principles. And I think, really establishing that riches and sometimes clarifies, the other things. And so could you talk first about kind of your background in education and just, your story, your journey before we dive into the breath work and the most recent kinds of things that you've been doing?
Yeah, so I mean, I started my undergraduate at University of Leeds in history, and then did a master's at Reading University in real estate, and then yeah, worked for about 5 years as a chartered surveyor, as we would call them in the UK. And then whilst I was doing that, I was fitness modeling. So I was trying to be in, well, I was in men's health, and I was got an agent, and I was doing photo shoots, and he developed an eating disorder, because that extreme dieting brought out that eating disorder. I don't think, when some people be like, I remember speaking to someone about tracking with MyFitnessPal, and I was, I track a lot at that time, and I still track now. But someone said to me, my family member did MyFitnessPal, and it gave them an eating disorder. And I was like, it may not have given them an eating disorder. It may have revealed an eating disorder, but I don't think it's the direct cause. And yeah, the for me, the fitness modeling, the trying to get down to 5% body fat, and the extreme extreme measures I had to take to do that revealed an eating disorder in me. Yeah, during that time I was working as a child surveyor, I was battling that eating disorder, learning a lot about nutrition, and helping friends. A lot of friends would reach out to me, being like, hey, can you write me a workout plan? Hey, can you write me a nutrition plan? Those types of things. And I would just do that for fun. And then I realized this is a lot more fun than being a surveying, valuing commercial real estate, like industrial warehouses in the worst parts of London, quite literally. So I pivoted to psychology and nutrition. I started in nutrition at University of Westminster. I did like a 1 year foundation, and then I was just like, nutrition's not quite my thing. I think it's psychology. So then I went to Regent's University London to study psychotherapy. And it was during that time that I discovered conscious connected breathing. So when I say I'm a breath worker, yeah, I really teach conscious connected breath work, which is the type of breath work that's, it's akin to a psychedelic ceremony. It's like a healing thing. It's not necessarily like you're stressed, you're at work, and you wouldn't do conscious connected breathing if you're stressed at work. This is like you do it deliberately in a ceremony with facilitators. It's a very tricky technique, and it has the habit of emotional expression for a variety of reasons. So people have these emotional releases, and often mystical experiences as well. So whilst I think self-talk-based psychotherapy is wonderful for many people. It is not effective for a lot of people, and I think especially for men, it's not as effective as it is for women. And I think there needs to be a lot more research done in that area to see. Actually, yeah, women, it really does help them. Reduces their cortisol levels, and they feel better after it. Whereas for men, supposedly, this is the work of John Gray and a guy who was on my podcast called Brian Park. When men have high stress, they have high cortisol, talking about their problems actually doesn't bring down their cortisol. Cortisol has an inverse relationship to testosterone. So when cortisol is high, testosterone can't be high. So what men need to do is go and raise their testosterone. And then once their testosterone is back at normal, healthy levels, they can then go into processing. They can then go into talking about those things. And yeah, I think breath work is another thing that is super effective for men. And during my psychotherapy training, I discovered okay, only 48% of people respond to CBT for anxiety. And of those 48% of people, 49% relapse within a matter of months. So maybe it's only 25% of people who really get anything long lasting for those things. Some people will criticize that and say, well, CBT is not the best method of psychotherapy, and other things. Fair enough. My point was, I discovered breathwork. It really helped me with my eating disorder. And I just discovered there was no research on it, or very little research. And on the research that had been done just wasn't really rigorous enough. There was a lot of pilot studies, a lot of small sample sizes, a lot of studies without control groups. So I was like, right, I'm going to do something about this. And I packed my bags and left London and moved to California and transferred onto a PhD program at CIIS, California Institute of Integral Studies, where the founder of Conscious Connected Breathwork, Stanislav Grof, was a professor back in the day. So yeah, so my PhD is not in breathwork. My PhD is in transpersonal psychology. But I did my research in breathwork. I conducted the largest ever randomized controlled trial on conscious connected breathing. So that's me. Just finished that. I'm still in the publishing process. I'm probably going to publish, or hoping to publish, 3 papers that came from my study. And yeah, that's next.
Awesome. Well, there's lots to dive in there. I was just having a conversation earlier this week about psychedelics and those kinds of experiences and therapies. And someone anecdotally said that they had a family member who was alcoholic and had one ketamine treatment and no longer had interest in alcohol. And I think it's interesting. We colloquially say, change my mind about that, right? Like we change the way that we think about something, but these kinds of things like psychedelics and breath work, and I mean, especially in the ceremonial way that you're describing it, can literally change our brain, change our mind, right? And I'd love to. I'm not super familiar with conscious connected breath work, so I want to definitely dive deep into that. How do you explain that concept to someone that's unfamiliar with the practice?
Sorry, 1 second. My wife is just leaving. Bye bye. Maybe I'll mark that clip so that yeah, we know to edit this out. Sorry, would you mind
Yeah, let me
asking
ask that
question?
again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not super familiar with conscious connected breath work, and so how do you define and explain the concept of that more ceremonial to someone that's unfamiliar with the practice?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different types of breath work. I don't know. Most people will think, oh, I don't know what most people think. Probably the most famous one is Wim Hof breath work, which is Tumo. It's an ancient Buddhist technique of hyperventilation and then breath retention. Intermittent hypoxia is one way of saying it. That's not what we did in my study. The other one, when people hear I'm a breath worker, they think I'm going to teach them how to breathe. I just at rest. Functional breathing, which is more in the realm of the oxygen advantage, the potato method, and Patrick McEwen, which I also teach, and yeah, I love, and I do that. That's what I do in the morning at the moment. So I'm working on carbon dioxide tolerance. And then other people think of pranayama. People think of yogic breath work, like that, the lion's breath and things that you might do in yoga. All wonderful, all have, all different benefits. I do think conscious connected breathing is the most powerful, hence why I did my study in it. So conscious connected breathing, as I say, you would do it lying down, because it really does alter your consciousness. And they've shown that put people in fMRIs and in EEGs, quantitative electroencephalograms, and shown that conscious connected breathing changes brain waves and cerebral hemodynamics, which means blood flow in the brain, by as much as a moderate dose of psilocybin mushrooms. So it really is doing things in the brain. It's not just a placebo. And so, yeah, the way it would work is you would probably go for a ceremony. Most people do it as a group. I also teach it online. My study was online. It was the first one to be done online, and showed that it was just as effective in person. The reason I did that was because of the pandemic, because, when I designed my study, we were still really in lockdown. Yeah, the way it happens is there's a teacher. You need someone to teach you this technique. It is quite complicated. It's not relaxing at all. It's quite effortful. So you're inhaling and exhaling through the mouth, and you're breathing more than normal. You're not really hyperventilating. Some people hear the word hyperventilation, they go, "Oh, that's terrible." No, well, chronic and acute hyperventilation, yes, probably quite bad for you. Lots of problems with that. This is voluntary hyperventilation. It's different. It's fine. It doesn't have any side effects that we've found so far. So this voluntary over breathing, some people prefer to call it over breathing. So it is breathing more than normal, and then you're doing a much shorter exhale than your inhale. And yeah, that's very stimulating. It's activating the sympathetic portion of the autonomic nervous system, and it can be quite confronting. It can be quite challenging. So it's really hard to do on your own, and that's why doing it in a group is helpful for that sort of social contagion, that effect of other people are doing it, so I can do it as well. And plus, you normally have facilitators, so you do it lying down. There'll normally be relaxing music, evocative music, emotional music, and you would do it for maybe, in my study, we did about 40 minutes. Some holotropic breathwork, which is the originator of that, they do like 2 to 3 hours of these ceremonies. And people will have different experiences. People will have emotional releases. People will have mystical experiences, transpersonal phenomena, such as a feeling of oneness and being connected to nature, or connected to the universe, or they meet deceased ancestors, or they meet God or their gods, and those types of things. And also people have like real euphoria as well, like feelings of just like love and gratitude and things like that. So the saying, get high on your own supply, it applies to breath work. So yeah, it is like, it's a therapy, really. It's not just like meditation, which is just like, it's a training. You're practicing regulating your nervous system. You're practicing bringing your mind back to a focal point. This is more like, you're going deep, you're working on your stuff, and you're coming out ultimately fundamentally changed in many cases.
You said something about it being equivalent to like a dose of psilocybin. Is this usually practiced like one ceremony, or is it ayahuasca is often like, you could just do one. Sometimes the ceremony is 3 or 4 days. What's the sort of typical protocol for this?
Yeah, so the study design that I used was 6 90-minute workshops over the course of 6 weeks, so one per week. Other studies have shown, like, it wasn't Puente. So Puente found, Ica Puente found that just one session increased HRV and reduced anxiety on the state trait anxiety scale. So just one session is enough to have an effect. We found with 6 weeks, clinical and statistically significant reductions in anxiety. So people going from moderate diagnoses of anxiety down to normal levels of anxiety over 6 weeks. Another study by there's a Brazilian study, I can't remember the name of the authors right now, it'll come back to me, but they did a clinical case study with someone with PTSD, and they had 8 sessions over the course of 8 weeks, and they found complete remission of PTSD. And there was this other study by Gaum that just found that it is dose dependent. So effectively, the more ceremonies you do, the better the results people got. However, this is where it gets complicated, and the research starts to become a little bit blurry, and you get into the realm of Instagram influencers all telling you different things that, maybe 1 in 10 are right. So you are overbreathing. When you are overbreathing, you are affecting your carbon dioxide sensitivity, creating an intolerance to it, which is not good for your health. Doing too much overbreathing is not good. We don't want people to be doing too much. How much is too much? Someone needs to do that. Someone needs to do that research. I would love to do that research. If anyone listening is an academic and works at a university, I am looking for postdoctoral fellowships right now. I have funding as well. So please get in touch with me. Let's do some more research on this. What I also found in my study was that 10 minutes of self practice daily did not affect people's anxiety results. So we ran kind of two experiments. So we had the 90 minutes once per week, the big ceremonies in a group. And then I also gave people a 10-minute guided recording of me guiding them through 10 minutes of conscious connected breathing. And I told people, do it every day. You don't have to do it, but I encourage you to, because I think that will help with integration. And then at the end of the experiment, we asked people on average how many times per week did you do this self practice? And we found no difference between the people who did it every day and the people who did it 0 times. So that brings up a lot of questions. It's like, well, is it that 10 minutes is just too short? You can't activate the deeper mechanisms of conscious connected breathing with just 10 minutes. I think that's definitely a part of it. When I do sessions with people, I normally see they start to have those emotional releases after about 30 minutes of conscious connected breathing. The other thing is like, is there a social factor? How much, some people in the qualitative feedback that we took from the study said, I really didn't get as much from the recording because I just preferred to be in the groups. When I was with the groups, I felt like we were all in it together, and that helped me to motivate me carry on and go to the difficult places in my life. The other one was the presence of a live facilitator. Even though I was encouraging people on this recording, people would just seemed like they were able to filter that out. Whereas when we were doing these live sessions over Zoom, I would say to people, Michael, slow down your exhale. Or Michael, if I saw you struggling, on the verge of tears, I'd be like, it's okay, Michael, accept this, surrender. It's safe to feel my emotions. And I think that's a lot more impactful for people when they have their name called out and it's a live person there. The other hypothesis that I've put out there is that there's a type of saturation effect in that you cannot get any more benefits than 90 minutes once per week. That's all you're going to get. Diminishing returns after that point. It's saturated, or at least for anxiety, because we were only measuring anxiety levels. Maybe if people were trying to do something else, like, I don't know, ADHD or depression, eating disorders, something else, excuse me, it would have affected it. But yeah, we're not sure.
Is it clear? You mentioned the mechanism. Is it clear what the mechanism by which this? No, it's not clear.
Absolutely not. There's a
Okay.
lot of different hypotheses, and I can go over a few right now. One is increased brain-derived neurotropic factor, so increased BDNF in the brain with this over breathing. My idea is that when you have increased BDNF, your brain is functioning better and you're able to work out what's causing your anxiety. In that heightened sense of focus, you can go, oh yeah, I just need to quit my job, then I'll be less anxious. Yeah, I just need to eat less sugar, then I'll be less anxious, whatever it is. There's a number two. I've probably got mechanisms of about 100, but let's go back to mystical experiences because they've already been mentioned. So we do know that psychedelic enabled mystical experiences lead to changes in people, whether it's changes in depression or anxiety. We know that when someone has a mystical experience on a psychedelic, they are fundamentally altered. They go to a place and they come back different, and they come back with often healing from these many things. And there was a recent study that Robin Carhart Harris was an author of. He's sort of the famous psychedelic researcher, but they did a study on breathwork, and they found that when people had mystical experiences, they had improvements in, can't remember what measurements, but improvements in their mental health. So that's one mechanism. ECB opens you up to mystical experiences. Who knows whether that mystical experience is generated in the brain or if it's, you downloading information from the universe, or God is speaking to you, or Allah, whoever, whatever you believe. I don't know. But certainly we know that mystical experiences have positive effects on people's mental health. The other thing, deep diaphragmatic breathing creates lymphatic drainage. It could be that people are just detoxing. It could be these people are just their bodies are just so stuck and so, gunked up with toxins, whatever that means, that the deep diaphragmatic breathing helps them detox. mitochondria start functioning better, their redox starts functioning better, their inflammation goes down. And that's another mechanism, inflammation. So there was a really cool study done back in like 2003 with about 40 people where they measured salivary immunoglobulin A, which is a marker of inflammation. And they found that conscious connected breathing improved markers of salivary immunoglobulin A. So it's improving immunity and reducing inflammation. And more research is showing that inflammation can be linked to things like anxiety and depression. So there's a couple of mechanisms of action for you. I think the other main one actually to mention is emotional expression. So there is this hypothesis called transient hypofrontality that Ryan, Wine, and Williams talk about in their 2007 paper. And their idea is when you do this over breathing, you're blowing off carbon dioxide. When you blow off carbon dioxide, the Bohr effect means that the hemoglobin holds on to the oxygen longer. And when there's less oxygen available to the brain, the prefrontal cortex gets down regulated. So, where the prefrontal cortex, one of its jobs is to protect us from pain, whether that's emotional pain, real or imagined, it still wants to protect us. So, when you go into talk therapy and let's say you want to talk about a traumatic event that you experience, your prefrontal cortex goes, yeah, I'm going to speak about it, but on the surface, but I'm not really going to feel it because that could be really, really painful. Whereas in conscious connected breathing, when the down regulation, that prefrontal cortex happens, you can then access that deep, painful emotion, maybe potentially the traumatic memory. So emotional expression, that is another mechanism of action that makes CCB so special, because I think, my personal experience, I could talk about my problems all day long, but I couldn't really feel them. I didn't know what it meant to feel. I can describe them in perfect detail, but when I did conscious connected breathing, that thinking part of my brain gets down regulated and the feelings come up for processing, and I can move on from there.
Beautiful. So in those mechanisms, and you said you have a longer list. So I want to see if there's one that you didn't mention that might be on the list. We talked about sort of physiological, emotional, psychological. This is terms we use in the West in medicine and in science, right? And if we go towards like Eastern medicine, that's sometimes considered a little more woo woo, and talk about energy, right? Not metabolism and the glycolytic cycle, not that kind of ATP energy, right? But the energy of the body and where we hold things. And I wonder, when you were talking about in person versus recording, anyone who's done a good bit of yoga, as I've done for the last 25 years, we know there's just a different experience, even if it's exact same instructor, right? If we took the recording of the class versus being in a class with other people, that shared energy of that space, you can just feel it sometimes walking into a class, and I wonder if you could speak at all to that sort of perspective, that experience as a potential mechanism.
Yeah. So we try to create a kind of sacred space. Some people may roll their eyes at that, but the music we choose is deliberately designed to get people into that kind of that sacred space. And I think there's more research coming out showing that awe is really important for mental health. Seeing our own place in the universe, seeing how small we really are relative to the mountains, the ocean, to God, to the planets, that can be really good for our mental health. And yeah, the music I use is often quite spiritual. It's not necessarily hymns from the choir, but I've trained it in I've done a little apprenticeship with the Shipibo tribe in Peru with ayahuasca, and we use a lot of their music. Their music is very spiritual and it can evoke these types of experiences, that kind of energy in people. So I think that's definitely a part of it. I also think, yeah, with energy. So when we were at the biohacking conference, do you remember there was that machine that could measure people's chakras? Did you ever go on that,
Mm.
Michael? Yeah.
I
Well,
did. I didn't. Yeah, I didn't try it out.
okay, well, I have a friend. She was actually on my podcast recently. She's a podcaster as well, and she has one of those machines that can measure your chakras. I think it's called like cerulean photography or something like that. And we did an experiment, just her and I, and her friend, who I think her friend actually owned this machine, and we measured her chakras before, and then we did a conscious connected breathing session online with me guiding her through it, and I could see her chakras. It was like live in time. So the way the chakra imagery works is like you'll have they have chakra systems like a line from sort of your sacrum up to your head, and depending how healthy they are, if they're really like far apart, like to the side, like out to the far right or the far left, there that means you're not centered. That means your chakras are misaligned. And we could see that over the course of this session, her chakras started to become more aligned. Those colors started to come back into the middle, and yeah, her energy changed massively before and after this session of like 40 to 45 minutes of conscious connected breathing. So something is happening with people's energy according to this this photography machine that can measure chakras. How effective it is, what Cronbach's alpha it has, which is something we use in research to measure our instruments, I don't know, but yeah, I think that was a pretty cool thing to witness.
Absolutely. You mentioned spirituality and ceremonies and things. Tell us more about that, your personal experience and how you see, for those that have not participated or been exposed to those kinds of things, what's the benefit? Why are you, I know, passionate and keen to do more in the future?
Mm. Yeah, my spirituality fluctuates quite a lot. As I said, just like with nutrition, I go back and forwards on a lot of things. I don't believe in anything really. I think I'm more of a scientist. I have seen some insane things. I've experienced some insane things from being a breathwork facilitator. So I guess, in my own practice, one of the things I found most useful is just coming to terms with the darkness inside of me and then the darkness inside of other people. And I feel like that's one of the most liberating things you can do, is just really experience your own pain and really experience how tragic it may be that, we're all going to die someday. And there's a very high possibility that's it, and there's no reincarnation. And then on top of that, you can kind of layer things like, okay, maybe there is reincarnation, maybe there is a God, maybe there is an all-loving uh, entity that is looking out for us. But I feel like if you're spending your whole life going like, I don't want to feel that pain, I don't want to be that sad, I don't want to be that scared, you're just going to be running around like making stuff up in your head, making bad decisions. Whereas, yeah, if you actually face these things and accept that they're possibilities, I feel like you'll be a lot more. I'm a lot less anxious now that I've done face that darkness. But yeah, that doesn't mean there's not a lot of amazing things in the world. And yeah, there's light and shadow everywhere.
From your breath work, from the ceremonies or that you've conducted or maybe that you've participated in, what's the most dramatic transformation or effect that you've witnessed through the particularly through breath work?
Yeah, well, obviously there's a lot of anecdotal stories, but I have data to show this amazing thing. So we used in my study the Zoom self-rating anxiety scale, which is a questionnaire with a high Cronbach's alpha, which means it reliably measures what it sets out to measure. And we had some huge changes. People with extreme levels of anxiety, so up in like the 70s. So I should say that the Zoom self-rating anxiety scale it's a score of 80 to 20, 20 the minimum, 80 the highest. And yeah, people went from like extreme levels of anxiety in the 70s down into sort of the 20s. You know, that data to me is amazing, but it's also supported by like qualitative feedback. And I have screenshotted some of these messages, just being like, "Thank you so much for putting on this study. I cannot believe that this. I did not believe this was possible. I did not believe it was possible to feel normal. Breath work is my thing. I'm going to keep doing it for the rest of my life. Where can I get more breath work?" So yeah, certainly I know that it, some people are much better off from this breath work. And then other mystical experiences, some people shared that things like, I did this breath work and my deceased sister came to me, we had a conversation, it was like she was there, I cannot believe how real it was, she told me I need to let go of her and I grieved her, and now I feel better. That darkness, that dark cloud that hung over me for so long is gone. Thank you so much. I can't believe this just happened from me doing some breath work.
Wow. Have you adopted or adapted your own sort of wellness routine or habits through what you've learned from your PhD research?
No, not really. So yeah, I think conscious connected breathing is like, it's medicine, really. It's not a practice that you do every day. It's like when you're sick or you need something, you go to it. So I think it's like something that you do for, let's say, 3 months. You do a 3 month program where you do weekly sessions with a facilitator, and then after that you maybe go to monthly sessions. So to me it's medicine. It can be overdone, as I say. It is voluntary over breathing. It can affect carbon dioxide sensitivity. So for me, saying this, I can. I had depression. I had suicide attempts. I had anxiety. I had eating disorder. Dealt with that, lived with that for the majority of my life. From about age 14, I was depressed, and it wasn't until I was about 30 that I really got rid of all these things. And during that time, that was the majority of my life. I had those conditions, and I just thought, this is life. This is just what it's like. It can't get any better. And it has gotten better. It was a lot of work, a lot of pain, a lot of struggles, but with conscious connected breathing and the help of like my mentor Alan Dolan and my therapist or former therapist Simon Matthews, I was able to recover from these things. And I didn't think that was possible, but I don't need that medicine anymore. Like, my life is great. I have other practices now that keep me going. So ice bath, sauna, exercise. I'm working on my functional breathing now. So yeah, I still do conscious connected breathing. So I'm dealing with something quite difficult in my life emotionally right now. So I've actually been doing a little bit more conscious connected breathing, just doing ceremonies with my wife. She's also a facilitator. So for me, it's like, you do conscious connected breathing because you need something. It's like surgery. You don't just go and have surgery for fun.
Got it. A lot of biohacking, and I mean, one of the questions that comes to mind is this something that AI could replace? That if these are facilitated sessions and they can be done remotely, right? Could AI replace this? And I think we're always often looking for a technological, solution that will make it easier for the either the person that's delivering that, or that we can, as you said, take on the road with us, and the hack in a way. And I like to think about what the future might hold, and I think oftentimes when we look at the progression of something, especially things that are trending, or they grow slowly and then there's an inflection point and it just takes off, and technology sometimes is the reason for that inflection point. So a long way to getting to the question: how do you see technology, intersecting with these kinds of more holistic practices?
So I definitely think there's a place for AI in mental health services. I think those chat bots can be quite useful for talk-based therapy for some people. I don't think it's going to work for conscious connected breathing, as evidenced by the fact that the 10-minute guided recording did not have the same effects as the live in-person sessions. I think uh, I was listening to a podcast the other day, but they were saying, like, statistically, the keys to happiness are like connection. And for connection, you need physical contact and eye contact. Without those things, you don't get the oxytocin, you don't get these things. And I just don't. I'm curious to know whether or not you could get oxytocin from a connection with an AI replica. Certainly not AI in its current format. Maybe if there's like AI bots that actually can give hugs in future, maybe. But yeah, that may be a fair few decades off. Who knows? The other thing I would say is, yeah, someone said to me, it was a part of the study, it's like, oh, this is amazing. It's just a shame that it's not scalable. It's just a shame that you need a human. I was like, a shame? It's not a shame that you need humans for these things. He's thinking financially. He's thinking, how do we make this, cheaper? How do you make? He's a friend of mine. He was thinking, how do you make more money from this? I'm like, I'm not in this for the money. That's for sure. But it is scalable relative to what we've got. No, it's not as scalable as Headspace or Calm app. Those, obviously billion-dollar companies. Whereas I'm comparing this to talk-based psychotherapy. A talk-based psychotherapist, let's say, it's $200 for 1 hour. And the average number of sessions you need for a breakthrough in talk-based therapy is 20 sessions, according to some research. We here had up to 25 people in a session. I had one facilitator, so we had a ratio of 1 to 13 people. So that's a lot better than 1 to 1, which you need for talk-based psychotherapy. And we got huge, large effect sizes, statistical significance in reductions in anxiety in just 6 sessions. I don't want to compare this to CBT because it's not one of my part of my study, but I'm going to do it anyway for the sake of your podcast. A big meta-analysis but done by Kuipers showed that CBT showed mild or small effect size, and in some cases no effect size compared to a placebo. This CCB showed large effect size. You can't get any larger than large. There's no extra large. If we could have extra large effect size, CCB would be an extra large effect size. So I think it's better than current treatments, and I think it should be a part of mainstream medicine. I'm in the process, or I'm trying to find a way of getting this into the National Health Service in the UK. Health service in the UK are very different to the US. The UK, there's not enough money to pay for things, so people go to their primary care physician and then they're turned away, or there's like an 18-month wait list. Whereas here it's like, yeah, good, what's your insurance? How can we rinse you for as much money as possible? So in the UK, this is going to be a really popular book. I think it should be really popular because it's going to save costs for the government and it's going to save costs for people. And it means, as I say, you don't need just one-to-one therapists. You just need one breath worker and up to 13 people. And this is another problem. Psychotherapists are in massive short supply. In the US, a shortage of 8,000 psychotherapists. In the UK, probably similar numbers. They need a lot more psychotherapists. Problem there is training to become a psychotherapist is really, really difficult. One, you need to be fairly academic. It's a master's level program. You need to be pretty rich as well. It's not very accessible for people who do not have the money to pay for an education and to pay for not be able to work for many years. It's also pretty grueling emotionally. Like, you have to do your own work. I think there is a place for training conscious connected breathwork facilitators to be sort of a starting point for people with mild anxiety, and then we free up psychiatrists and psychotherapists to deal with the more severe cases. And I think that could be a really useful solution to the mental health crisis.
I love that. I think one of the challenges with therapy as well is that you need, I think, to for it to really work, you need rapport and connection with that person, right? And I think there's a lot of therapists out there. We still have too few, but there's a lot out there. But there's a small percentage that are really good, and even small percentage that are great, and to find a really good one who you can also develop rapport with, and if you want to be in person, who's also nearby you, right, is a limiting factor for sure. So even having more of them, if we had, if we were talking about physical medicine as opposed to psychological things, if you had lots of doctors but they weren't well trained, or they just were not good, that doesn't really help the healthcare, that doesn't boost the healthcare system. So it's great to have alternatives in mental health.
Yeah, and you are exactly right. The evidence does show that the two predictive factors of whether or not someone is going to have a successful outcome in talk-based psychotherapy is the rapport between the therapist and the client. The other one is the motivation of the client to change. So there's that joke, how many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? And you say, don't know. Just one, but the light bulb has to want to change, and that is that is the problem. You cannot change someone. And I know a lot of psychotherapists. I know quite a few in training. I have family members in psychotherapy, and I think a lot of people some people go into psychotherapy thinking, all I need to do is just give people the therapy and they'll be healed. They won't be sad anymore. They won't be depressed. They won't have their mental health issues. Or they work with homeless people, and they're just like, oh yeah, we just need to give these people the therapy and some love and they'll be fine. Unfortunately, that's not reality. I mentioned about facing the darkness of reality. Some people do not want to change, and I think a lot of psychotherapists burn out because they think they can change everyone. Psychotherapists are not God, certainly not, and neither are breath workers, of course. And yeah, we can't fix people who don't want to be fixed, and we just have to acknowledge our own powerlessness at times.
Yeah. I can tell, anyone can tell by listening to you, that you're very inquisitive and someone that asks a lot of quality questions. So if you had a team, if you ran your own lab, you have the Dr. Blake laboratory at some prominent university, and you have a team of graduate students or researchers working with you, what are a few questions that you would tackle? what, when you're writing the ROI or one grant, what are those compelling questions that you really want answered? Fast forward a decade and it's 2034, and we look back on this and like, I'm really glad I put that out there so that this person reached out to me and we got that funding to answer
Yeah,
those
yeah.
questions.
Yeah, a lot of questions. Yeah, I'll list them off because they are written down in my dissertation. But yeah, I'd be really interested to know how conscious connected breathing affects carbon dioxide sensitivity, and whether on what's the right amount of conscious connected breathing to do, and how much functional breathing do you need to do to offset any changes in carbon dioxide tolerance from the CCB, conscious connected breathing. So that would definitely be one. Another one is, does it work for other things? Does it work for depression? Let's do a study on depression. Another one is in-person breathwork better than online breathwork? I think there's a lot of like trade-offs between the two. So, a lot of my participants in the study were in London. So let's say they had to come into a yoga studio in central London. They go into an altered state. They meet God in this thing, then they have to get the underground, the train back, and they're crammed and they're sweaty, and they have to go through that miserable experience after their mystical experience. Does that negate the benefits they've had? Whereas when they're doing it online, they do it in the comfort of their own home. They can just roll over and lie down and for an hour or two, or just integrate that way. So yeah, I'd like to see a comparison of in-person versus online. I'm also very interested in sports as well, sports psychologies. I have put this idea to an academic who works with professional footballers in Spain, but I would be interested to know whether nasal breathing predicts success in penalty shootouts in football, in soccer. So actually, before we came on this call, I've been recording every Copa America and Euro game, and every game that has a penalty shootout, I'm looking at who's nasal breathing and who is not nasal breathing. I've only got two data points so far. One of them is Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo, arguably the most famous footballer in the world. He scored his penalty, and do you know what I noticed? He took a big nasal breath before he went into it. So I'd be that's some research I'd like to know. I'd also like to see whether or not functional breathing, oxygen advantage style breathing, improves markers of athleticism. So this could be with professional footballers, it could be with runners, it could be with NFL players. Does improving their carbon dioxide tolerance lead to they run further in the game, they recover quicker after games, they're less injured, they execute more because when they are really fatigued, they can tolerate that carbon dioxide and they can think more clearly. So yeah, I would like to do some research on that too.
I think that's a really fascinating idea, and I'd love to have some other podcast guests on and talk about this crossover between breath and sports science. And I wonder, you also do CrossFit sometimes, and maybe an avid CrossFitter. And do you consciously think about breathing ever when you're doing high intensity work?
Yeah, absolutely. I Things I do is during training, I'll be nasal breathing as much as possible, especially in the warm up. I will try and stay with nasal breathing as long as I can. And then once I can't stay with nasal breathing, I'll go nasal in, mouth out. And then once I can't do that, I'll do mouth in, mouth out. Other things I think about is, let's say it's a workout where there's rest programmed in. I'm thinking, what's the best way to get my breath back? And that is usually nasal breathing, slowing down the heart rate as much as possible, still breathing, big breaths, but I'm trying to relax myself as much as possible between sets so that I can, be ready for the next thing. So there's a lot you can do, a lot of exercises to improve carbon dioxide sensitivity. Just like in the warm up on a fan bike, you can do things like, let's say you're on the fan bike and you pedal normally for 1 minute, and then you pinch your nose and you hold your breath and you see how many pedal counts you can get before you have to breathe in. And for most people, it's like 3 or 4 with that fan bike type thing. And then you recover for a minute and then you try again and you see if you can go from 4 pedal rotations to 6 to 8 to 12, and see how long you can hold your breath for.
What is the advantage of that? What's the benefit of doing something like that?
So increasing carbon dioxide sensitivity, so tolerance. As we exercise more and more, we, build up carbon dioxide, and if you are tolerant to carbon dioxide, you can effectively do more with less. So you can run longer. You can do more in an anaerobic state. So it's increasing your capacity for work and being more efficient with the energy, which oxygen is a form of energy. You're doing more with that fuel.
The breath is so powerful in so many ways, and I think we spend so much time talking about oxygen. I think it was the book Breathe that was published a few years ago that really emphasized carbon dioxide and carbon dioxide sensitivity and things like that, which often gets overlooked. We focus so much on oxygen.
Mm.
If we have a few more minutes, are you good with time for a
Yeah.
few minute questions? I know another side of you, one of the many hats you wear is you fancy yourself an investor in some things. I'm joking, but
I fancy
you've been
myself.
you've been a successful investor in some various areas, and one of them that you're currently focused on, I think, is in evaluating and investing in wellness startups. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, always looking out for the next big thing.
Yeah, so I'm interested with your scientific mind. How do you, in wearing your investor hat, from a business standpoint, evaluate startups?
Not very scientifically, to be honest. I've read a lot of investors' books and a lot of blogs and podcasts and things like that. And I think most people just sort of be like, if anyone really thinks they know what they're doing, you're probably lying. Most of it is luck. So I don't do too much analysis. I really just go on like feel. It really is gut and intuition. And I think I've got a fairly good eye for what's trends, things like that. I can remember when the Whoop first came out, and I have family members who work with professional athletes, and I was like, you got to get your team's Whoops, and they were like, well, whatever. Now Cristiano Ronaldo and all these players are wearing Whoops and things like that. I was like, I should have told you all those years ago. Should have listened to me. I've probably got a lot more wrong than I have right, but I think I've got an eye for those types of things. Is that something that can really be taught or explained? I don't know. Am I actually very good at it? I don't know. Do I? Yeah, I think yeah, it's having an eye for a trend, and then also getting a good feel for the CEOs. Someone can have the greatest product, but then they just can't execute on that because they're not very nice people, and they can't manage their staff, or they things go to their head, and they start spending more money on their business class flights than research and development and things like that. So getting a good feel for the CEO, the team, that kind of thing. Is that's really as far as I go. It's like, do I like the people? Would I work with them? Do I want to spend money on this person because it's generally as the person? And then do I think what they're doing is doing something that other people aren't? So yeah, I'm probably not the best person to teach those types of things, but there it is.
Well, it brings to mind, I was just rereading the Almanac of Al Ravikant, and he talked about four types of luck, right? And I think you're talking about if you say I'm lucky in investing, what you do is really gain an appreciation for recognizing trends early and evaluating the team and these kinds of things. And so what you might attribute to luck is probably, or even intuition, is probably a lot of that work behind the scenes that you may just, maybe you're a natural at doing those things. And so it becomes easy and effortless to do that because once you're in that position, you just know. And you don't know how necessarily but that's what comes to mind when you describe that.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's a great book. I read that a while ago, but I don't
Yeah.
remember that bit. But maybe you're right.
Yeah. So, with all the amazing experiences you've had, retreats and your PhD and fitness modeling and all of the things, what's next?
Good question. More research. I would love to do some more research. Teacher trainings on breathwork. So I am already doing teacher training. So teaching breath workers to be breath workers. I work with Alan Dolan, breath guru, who my wife also does some work for. That is in Spain, and then most of the clients are in the UK. So we travel back to work with them. and regulating the breathwork industry. So this is something I'm quite passionate about. So the breathwork industry has been described by many people as a wild west. There are people teaching breathwork who've never had a training at all. They've just done breathwork and they're like, this is cool. I'm going to tell everyone and start charging people. There are also many trainings that are not fit for purpose. Breathwork is an incredibly powerful tool, and some people just don't realize that. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect. People do a bit of breath work and then they think they know everything, but as you learn more and more, you realize how little you know. So I am involved with a few organizations. There's the UK Breathwork Alliance, there's the Global Practitioners Breathwork Alliance, and we're trying to raise standards of the industry, raise standards of certification processes, and also as I say, coming back to that theme of darkness and light, there are bad breath workers out there. There are people who should not be teaching breath work. They are sexual abusers, convicted sexual abusers who are teaching breath work, and they should not be allowed to do that. And other industries that are regulated, like doctors and psychotherapy, these people would not be allowed to work, but they are allowed to work in breath work. And so, more needs to be done to confront the shadows, because we can all be like, love and light and breath work is healing and people have mystical experiences, but also some people can take that power and just abuse it. And we've got to be real about those things, and we've got to do something about it. Other things, I do my podcast, so I'm growing my podcast, Laughing Through the Pain, Navigating Wellness, with my co-host Andy Esam. That is also on the agenda. Writing a book as well is on the agenda as well. Turning my dissertation into a book is also something I'm trying to do at the moment. So quite a few things, quite a few pans in the oven, pans on the burner. Nothing really concrete apart from the podcast at the moment.
Well, yeah, other than your podcast, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. That's my most active platform. I'm at the Breath Geek, so that's the underscore breath underscore geek. And my website as well is thebreathgeek.com. And come check us out on the podcast as well, Laughing Through the Pain, Navigating Wellness, where my co-host, he's not a biohacker. He has an undergraduate degree in psychology, but he like me, I met him on my real estate course, and he works in commercial real estate, and he's a comedy writer as well. So we have a little bit of a laugh as well.
Excellent. Is there any final comments before we wrap up today?
No, I think that's it. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thanks for being with me today, Richard. You've been listening to Performance Lab. I'm Dr. Michael Donovan, reminding you that peak performance is a journey, not a destination. For more cutting edge insights and actionable tips, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media. Until next time, keep pushing your limits and stay tuned to the Performance Lab.